Hello, and welcome to VCT China Recap Stage 1, Day 1. My name is Unofficial Artificer, and I will be your guide through China this stage. My goal is simply to inform you of what's going on. I am not a high-level analyst, I do not have a high rank in Valorant, but I do love the game, and I've set it upon myself to at least be a resource where you can check in and listen to me talk about the games so you know what's actually going on in China and you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to watch it. A huge shout out to Psychopath Poro, who I've stolen the entire layout of this system from. I will be making changes and adjustments as we go along to better communicate information in Valorant, but for today, this is just the way that Psychopath Poro displays information. Go check out Poro's stuff. They stream on Twitch. They have a YouTube channel. They do rundowns of large league events, and they're very cool. So this is how the format's going to work. I'm going to predict the match at the start. Then I'm going to take that prediction and bring it into each game where I'll do a brief analysis of the draft and the picks, a little bit of commentary about what happened in the game. At some point, I'd like to pull up specific rounds and talk about them, but for today, that will have to be a pipe dream. Then I will take all the players' stats and my personal biases and put them onto a 5-star rating system before nominating someone as my MVP for the day, before nominating someone as my MVP for the match. And with that out of the way, let's get on to predictions. Today, Game 1 is TEC Esports versus All Gamers. All Gamers being the Chinese team that made it the furthest at Master Santiago, and the only Chinese team to actually take a map off another team at Master Santiago. I have them going 2-0 against TEC Esports. And while I'm not super confident in this, I should give the courtesy to All Gamers, at least in this preliminary scouting. The second one is Edward Gaming versus Nova. Here I have Edward Gaming going 2-1 against Nova. Nova is one of the worst teams in VCT as far as I hear, so that's not great. But I'm going into this with the expectation that they'll at least be able to put up some fight against an EDG that is trying to resync because they've subbed in Jenny for CB, thank God. And with that out of the way, let's get into the matches. Game 1 is on Lotus, and probably the major thing I'd like to point out was the Cypher pick. Kira's Cypher got enormous value in this game. Kira specifically getting trips up on attack that were basically never contested, meaning that AG could focus entirely on holding the site for many, many rounds. It kind of felt like TEC Esports just didn't understand that they had to force this Cypher to consider flanks at some point. It took until about halfway through the attacking half of AG for them to break like their first trip. Along with that, TEC Esports consistently over-rotates to pressure. A number of rounds were won by the fact that AG would pressure mount, get the alt orb, flip the map, go towards a site, and just win in post-plant. Or, entirely separately, they would win Rubble fight, post up Kira's Cypher there, then leave, go C, get the alt orb, and Kira would find a couple kills on his Lurk, and they get a free site and a win in post-plant. My star player of this specific map, I think, was Kira. Kira had an enormous amount of impact on the Cypher on attack half, which feels really weird. Additionally, a shout out to Fengir, who also played pretty well, but also had some int moments. Game 2, on Bind, we've got some comps to talk about. Game 2 on Bind, we have some comps to talk about. AG have picked out a double initiator, double controller comp running the Viper Brim as per normal, along with a Sky and a Gecko. The solo Waylay on this team has a lot of responsibility, but theoretically the Gecko and the Sky can entry with the Waylay in a second layer. In reality, the Gecko felt kind of toothless and without any real impact. There was one round where they comboed Waylay ult and Gecko ult to get a free kill, but there wasn't a whole lot of impact from this Gecko. I honestly would have preferred to see another duelist here. On the opposing side, I have my assumption on what the future meta of Bind is going to be. Double controller, double duelist. Waylay and Neon on Bind are very good. Raze isn't needed to clear space, and in fact, Raze's win rate on Bind has been kind of turbulent in the past split. Skye getting her blinding lights back on a 60-second cooldown means that she provides enough utility throughout the game in order to do that job. We don't need the Sova, we don't need a Fade. And, of course, Brimstone Viper to anchor sites and set up the lurk wall. A brief shout out to Dynamite, who played a really good attacking half, but overall, the Map 2 MVP for me goes to Coco, who played an unbelievable game on Viper. He looked like Prime Nats. He was finding so many timings. Every single time we cut to Coco's screen, he was getting a kill. He was finding his way into the back line. It was good. Moving on to Game 3 on Breeze, we have a mirror match in comps. Probably what the meta is going to settle as the definitive comp for this map, the double duelist, double controller comp. We're playing Neon Waylay on both teams, along with Astra Viper on both teams, along with the Sova that is mandatory on Breeze. This game was not clean. It was sloppy. It went to overtime. TEC Esports, who lost the game in the end, had an advantage of 12-9 at one point, and that's probably the big story of this game. I'd like to focus specifically on Coco, who again played an unbelievable Viper game during this series. If TEC Esports had won the series, Coco would 100% be my MVP, but he did not play well enough for me to warrant giving the losing team MVP buff. Fengyr had a great game here. Fengyr has had a great series overall, being one of the main initiators and the main fraggers on AG, and I think his impact cannot be understated, which is why I'm giving Fengyr the MVP. Overall, I'm actually kind of disappointed. with AG's gameplay. They weren't deep on a strategic level, and while they still had enough depth to outclass TEC Esports on many moments on many maps, it still wasn't that good. I think TEC have potential to actually go places. Dynamite and Coco showed performances that were unbelievably good during the series. Haodong played pretty well. Lucas had a couple clutch moments. Spitfire did his job. Not particularly well, but he did his job. This team has potential. With a couple more fundamentals and some innovative style, I think TEC Esports could convincingly beat AG. They just weren't here on the day. The second series today is Nova Esports versus Edward Gaming, and Game 1 happens on Fracture, and you're probably looking at my star scores, and you already know what happened. Fracture would be won by EDG 13-2. Basically, nobody on Nova ever had a chance to shoot their gun, as apparently their mouse buttons didn't work. Strategically, I don't think there's anything super notable to say about this map. Kang, despite numerically being quite strong, had a number of moments where he'd get a kill, dash forwards and die, with one particularly bad round where he dashed forwards with the operator, whiffed his dash, and then died. The real star of the show, and the person in the most pressure in this position, Jenny. Jenny was really good as a Neon in this map. Jenny performed very well as an entry player, as a duo with Kang, even picking up the operator in a couple of rounds. Jenny was a menace on this map. I am very happy with Jenny's performance. Let's hope he can keep it up into Map 2. Map 2 was Breeze, and it went just about as well. Nova can't shoot their guns, apparently. it's hard to say, like, about these comps specifically. Both of these comps have opted into older styles. Like, Nova is playing double duelist, double controller, but they're playing Jet Omen. Nova's comp integrates a double duelist, double controller comp with specifically a taste of Jet, which is interesting as Jet obviously can hold the operator on this map, which is an integral part of the ecosystem of Breeze, but also is worse than Waylay. On the flip side, EDG have opted for what I'd call a 2020 like 4 comp, where we're running the solo duelist plus double smokes, double initiator. And specifically, we're using KO Sova on Breeze. Lastly, instead of Omen or Astra for Smoggy, we have Harbor. And the Harbor looked fine. It didn't have any outstanding moments. It would probably be just as good as the Astra. Also, like, the quality of this game and the opponents wasn't enough of a stress test. I don't know if Harbor will be good on this map. But evidently they're willing to try it because they were playing in kickoff before the Harbor buffs. So, we'll see. Jenny again had an unbelievable game. And just shows the diversity and the depth of his play, and thank goodness CB is out. And with my glazing done, I'll do a bit more, because, of course, I gave my MVP to Jenny. 36, 15, and 9. This game wasn't close. I didn't want to give anyone 5 stars because EDG's performance wasn't particularly interesting. Decision-making wasn't great. I think Jenny's particularly good and notable because he wouldn't overswing. He wouldn't overheat. He wouldn't look for too much. He would get his kill, hold his angle. Under pressure, he'd leave, and he'd regroup with his team. Jenny was constantly the one being reserved on this team while Kang through. In summary, EDG looked good because they were fighting a bag of potatoes this week, but it's a good start. I'm hopeful for EDG's next game to see whether EDG can return to form as they were in 2024. Nova Esports need to figure out their comps and just need to get some confidence. Someone needs to step up on this team and kill someone. And that was day 1 of stage 1. VCT China recap done by Unofficial Artificer. Thank you for watching.